I think we should be good to go. Yes. Is everything working? Live stream should be live momentarily. Yes, that's good. Things are hopefully going to be showing up in the next several seconds. Yes, that's good. All right, cool. Hey, folks, welcome back to what I'm going to be calling technically a review of the Dominaria United cards, since we have the full spoilers now, with the intention of looking at what they're going to mean for historic Brawl, and what, if I'm going to be more honest, is just me blatantly speculating about what these cards will do in the format that I like the most, while going through all of them. In order to make this as useful for anybody who might want to actually be looking for it, the order I'm going to be doing this is we're going to go through all of the Dominaria United, all the new potential commanders. Since this is historic Brawl, that does include planeswalkers. And then we're going to go through the rest of the cards in the set. I'm also not going to spend too much time on a mechanic once I cover it the first time, so I might go over Kicker the first time it comes up. I might go over, what is it called? It's not Collision. There's two new effects. One's Coalition, one's the other one. But basically, I'm just going to go through it and talk to myself for an hour. This is not the best way, I think, to probably present this information. I have some better ideas for next time. But the big one is going to be I need to find a way to get a bunch of high-quality card images, basically. Regardless of all of that, let's just jump into it. So let's start with all of the new commanders that we have. I've looked at some of these cards because I had to copy them over to this slideshow, but not too much of all of them, and I haven't spent too much time thinking about them. So we may as well just jump right in. First up, a Johnny, Sleeper Agent, Planeswalker. He's got the same completed mechanic that we've seen on... Oh, that's interesting. The same one we've seen on Tameo, actually. So you can pay it with the color or life. If you pay with life, the enters with less loyalty counters. I just need to read this. So normally would enter with 4. Reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature or planeswalker, put into your hand. Otherwise, put on the bottom. Distribute +1/+1 counters. And emblem that is an additional win condition. So the thing about this that I think is interesting is because green and white in Historic Brawl and in this format in general, I think actually have the best proliferate support. And his emblem is relatively cheap, which means if you drop him on 4, get off a proliferate trigger, get off 2, drop him on 4, get off a trigger on next turn after that, you can immediately crack out his emblem. And his emblem is a slow win condition. I don't think he's going to be like incredible and defining, but because his +1 and his -3 are just kind of meh, right? Maybe he sees purpose as... He might be like a useful... Well, let's see, actually. Okay, so what I actually can see this being used for, maybe not as a commander, but in white-green weenie decks. If you're swarming the board on turn 1 and 2, pop this out on 3 or 4, and then actually get his emblem off, he's an alternate win condition for white weenies that doesn't rely on the board state. But at the same time, if you're going to do that, you'd probably rather be doing stuff with his -3, in which case you'll never get the emblem. So I guess we'll have to see. I'm not super impressed or worried by this guy. Aeron, Benalia's Ruin, 2 white, a black, 3/3, Phyrexian Human, Menace, sack another creature, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. I think this will probably get used, actually. I think this will be neat. I think I think you could probably build around that pretty easily. Actually, the downside to this is that it's not sack another creature on the 2. You've got to have him come in not of Summoning Sickness. So he might be a little bit weaker than he first looks. But black-white weenies or black-white value with just things like the vampires that grow bigger and stuff like that, I can see maybe using it. The other thing that I think, and we'll get to this, is there's a lot of cards now that sort of use legendary as, like, they give bonuses to legendary creatures and stuff like that. He might get used for more for that. As a commander, he seems... he's not the most exciting thing in the world, but at least he does something useful, and he does it in a generic sort of flavor. So maybe he gets used in weenie or token decks, or he gets used as the commander for something like that. But he doesn't have anywhere near the speed or aggression for real weenies like something like Adeline. So I'm not super... Again, this is... My first impressions are mid-tier. Astor, Bearer of Blades, 2, 1 red, 1 white, 4/4. When he ETBs, look at the top 7, reveal equipment or vehicles, put into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Equipment you control have equip 1. Vehicles you control have equip. Okay. This guy I can see being useful. This guy I can see being interesting. Red-white already has a bunch of other support. So I can see him being useful as both a commander, and I can see him being useful in existing decks. Red-white already has a bunch of, like... Obviously, they're not, like, the toppest of tier decks. Equipments... Yeah, there's a lot of those, right? The equipments that cost 10 or so to equip, or ones that just have sort of other ridiculous costs. I think that's useful. I think making vehicles have crew 1 also means that you drop him, and as the P resolves, you can crew out something kind of ridiculous if it's there. I don't think there's too many of those, though, in Historic Brawl. It'll be neat. But if I'm ranking cards, I'm like, hey, this is actually kind of neat. This guy falls into hey, kind of neat, because there's already like equipment-based creature decks that would be like, hey, yeah, this is good. I can slot this in. And he also has an ETB effect, so I'm going to say slightly higher up there. Ba'ird, Agrivian Recruiter. Beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with power greater than space power, create a 1/1 white soldier token. This card's both really interesting and really uninteresting. It's interesting in that it's like, hey, there's a lot of ways to control a creature with a power greater than space power, and it's uninteresting that it's like, okay, if you fulfill this condition, congratulations, you get a 1/1. Clap, 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 clap. I don't know. As a commander, that's just such a small effect that it's just not worth the effort to get the trigger off, even if the trigger itself is kind of cool. Balmor, Battle Mage, Captain, green-red, 1/3. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, creature you control get 1/0 and trample until end of turn. Interesting. So, aggro birds. The fact that it's just whenever you cast and not whenever you cast or copy is a bit of a downside, right? But it's not terrible. Like, it's in the uncommon slot, right? This seems like a decent... For what it is, this is decent. Please shoot you if you ever make that deck. Alright. Will do. Alright, let's see who the next one is going to be. Portruck Bone Rattle. Okay, so this is a card where I want to talk about something which is... Yeah, I'd agree. This is a card where I want to talk about something that's kind of present in a lot of the cards in this set, and is fine in every other format except Historic Brawl. So domain is the new keyword. Basically, it's... Your domain is going to be X, where X is 1 plus the number of different basic lands you control, which is useful if you're running 3 or 4 or 5 color decks. Unfortunately, we're looking at this as a commander, Bortruck's effect, basically he's a 4/4 for 6, which is not great. When ETBs, if you cast him, choose target creature in your graveyard, return that card to the battlefield if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of basic land types among lands you control, otherwise put it into your hand. This is a perfectly fine effect that is vastly overcosted on this card. And in addition to that, all domain commander, yeah, that's kind of... Well, the thing is, as a commander, yeah, auto skip him, but I don't have him in the other parts of the list. But he's useful in other decks, right? So I can see him getting used in some of like Varrock or Muldrotha, right? Where all of a sudden it's a 4, right? It's not fantastic effect. He's kind of a bad example of it because of his stat line, but actually, honestly, he's a bad example of it because of his mana cost. His mana cost is just such complete garbage. But I can see him getting played in other decks, just not as a commander. Ilias Elcor, Sadistic Pilgrim, 1 white, 1 black, 2/2. Death Touch, whenever another creature ETBs, you gain 1 life. Whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. This will get run. This will get played in existing black-white decks. I might put this into my Death and Taxes deck, actually. It's a 2/2 with Death Touch, which is perfectly fine, and it has a crappier version of Blood Artist pinned to it. As a commander, it'd have to be an aggro, but I think it's pretty good. I don't think it's like god tier, but I think it's very useful. The fact that it does have Death Touch on it means that at a bare minimum, it's a useful chump block body that will trade. So Irtai Resurrected. So this is an interesting card because I've looked at some people talking about this one before I did this stream, and there's a lot of... It goes one of two ways. You either look at this card and you go, oh god, god fucking damn it, it's Brawl version 2.0, or you look at this card and you go, wow, it's the biggest trap that has ever been placed. 2, 1 black, 1 blue. Yeah, he's a neat one. When he ETBs, counter a spell, ability, or triggered ability, its controller draws a card. Destroy another target creature walker, its controller draws a card. So, other people's consensus on this card, I think, has been this guy's going to be more useful for bouncing him to do stuff. I'm not sure how much black-blue, like, cheap stack bounce there is. Like, white has a lot of it, but I don't actually know how much of it blue has, right? Obviously, blue has return to hand, but that's not quite the same thing. The other thing that people were looking at and going, is the controller draws a card. So if you're using this to blow up stuff your opponent has, you are going to give them cards. Obviously, there's tech around that, and that really annoying Planeswalker that makes so your opponent can't draw more than 1 card per turn. This guy will either end up being really good or kind of a dud. He'll probably get played... I'd say that he'll get played regardless. What I don't know is how he'll get played as a commander. He'll get played regardless because he's a destroy target creature or counter target spell or an activated ability or a triggered ability and a 3/2 body. That'll get him played. Whether or not as a commander he does too much, we'll have to see. All right, Garna, Bloodfist of Keld. I don't know Crystal Shard. I'll have to look that one up. Garna, Bloodfist of Keld. 1 colorless, 1 black, 2 red. Whenever another creature he controls dies, draw a card if it was attacking. Otherwise, Garna deals 1 damage to each opponent. 4/3. Interesting. Human Berserker. Huh. You know, this is one of those cards that's fine. It's not exciting, but it doesn't make me look at it and just die inside at the thought of making a deck with it as the commander, because it's not Corlessa. It's a perfectly fine effect on a mildly statted body, but I don't know... I guess it can be a decent amount of... This will, as a support, actually, this is probably pretty decent as a support card for existing black-red. Because all of a sudden it turns your board into, hey, yeah, you can chump me, and I will get 3 more cards. Thank you very much. So maybe that makes this a little bit better than I was first thinking, because black-red doesn't have a lot of unconditional card draw. Usually it's either sack creatures for card draw in black, or discard cards to draw in red. But it's definitely an aggro card. Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief. This one's neat. It's interesting. I don't know how good it is. So, whenever a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief, you may copy the spell. The copy targets Ivy. This is probably one of those weird... This is one of those weird cards I'm going to get wrong because it's probably useful. It costs 2. Yeah, you like it. I think it's neat. Oh. So, auras... Oh, that will copy auras. I hadn't thought about that. I was mostly looking at this in terms of instants and sorceries. Yeah, it's a little bit like... This into Feather actually might be kind of really annoying for the Feather player. You can use Cantrip on it. Cantrips are good too. I don't quite know how you build around it. I guess maybe it's like a Pumper or auras. It seems decent. But the thing is, like, you can't, it's whenever they cast a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy, right? So you can't cantrip yourself. You can't be like, put a +1/+1, then copy it to get another +1/+1. Or, more likely, draw a card sort of thing. So... But it is a May trigger, so at least it's not like, oh, I lightning bolted something, or they lightning bolted something, and now they also get to hit Ivy. Jehoria, Ageless Innovator. Put 2 in... Oh, this is going to be... This is a 2-drop, 2/3. That's decent stat line. That's true. Decent stat line. This is going to be some weird effect. Put 2 Ingenuity counters on Jehoria, then you may put an artifact card with mana X or less onto the battlefield where... Oh, goddamn. Okay, this seems very good. This seems like it's going to be very good. Yeah, extremely limited Aether Vial, but it's a 2/3 for 2. And if you don't do something about it, you just get to start... They just get to start cheating out artifacts. I guess in Historic Brawl, that's not too big of an issue. Blue has some decent proliferate effects. There might be some way to do something cheeky with it. I feel like what's going to make this annoying is it's going to go in a sort of control-y deck to start with. But yeah, the fact that it resets is going to be a little tricky, but I think you have to take that, right? It is only a 2-drop. All right. Let's see who the next one's going to be. Joda the Unifier. Okay, so this is the deck that everybody is expecting to be the next Go Shintai, aka the next Golos, aka the next First Sliver. And it's just going to be so much fun, guys. Just the best. One of each color, 5/5. Legendary creatures you control get XX, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control. Whenever you... Oh, and also it basically cascades legendary creatures. Whenever you cast a legendary spell, from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile legendary non-land card with lesser mana value. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your... That's literally just Cascade. This is Cascade, but just oops all legendaries. Yeah, what's that? Chat does not like it. It might be the next. It might be the next one. We'll have to see. Anyway, I hope you get everybody start looking at this card because you're going to be seeing it a lot forever. King Darien XLVIII. 1 colorless, 1 green, 1 white, 2/3. Other creatures you control get +1/+1. Put a 1/1 on King Darien. Create a 1/1 soldier. Sack him. Creatures you get hexproof and indestructible. Bland-based toys for bland-based children. I think this is good, actually. Yeah, I think this is decent. He's not the most exciting thing in the world, but in green-white, where you might have the situation where you've got way too much mana, and he also, you know, he pumps tokens, right? He's perfectly fine. He's not the most exciting thing in the world. He's probably... But he's not bad. I think that's the big thing. Oh, you know, who's that 1-drop that gets piloted a lot? Yeah, the token and destruction thing. Who's that 1-drop that the 1-drop elf that makes... Is it Sisay? It's not Sisay. I'm thinking of a... What card am I thinking of? There's an existing green-white deck that this might slot really well into. Because of the fact that he ETBs and you can sack him. Riss, that's it, yes. I feel like this might slot into Riss. The fact that he's not an elf might not count for as much, but he seems decent enough. He might slot into those lists. Oh, next up. Lagomos, Hand of Hatred. 1 black, 1 red, 1/3. Beginning of combat, make a 2/3 elemental with trample and haste. Sack it at the beginning of the next end step. Tap, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Activate only if 5 or more creatures died this turn. That's a terrible conditional effect. How are you ever going to hit that? That's Inga Runai's level of quality. What about the other thing? I guess he makes a 2/1 red elemental token at combat. That's decent. It's not nothing. You know, he might actually be playable just for that. For the fact that he's going to create bodies that are going to be constantly dying. Combine that with Blood Artist and a couple other things. I think he's actually pretty good. I think he's good in like a black-red pinger. Whenever a card excites you, that's a sign that everything's going to go very badly for me. I kind of like this. I think he can sort of slot in. He generates a bunch of stuff that can be sacked. You can also use it as sack fodder for other effects. I don't think I will ever tap him to search my library for a card. You know what is kind of interesting about that effect is that it's not sorcery speed. So I'm sure there's some weird situation. In actual Commander, I wonder if he's much better. Because I feel like 5 creatures dying in a turn in real multiplayer would be more interesting. But this is a Historic Brawl review. So I don't think that's ever going to happen in Historic Brawl. Alright, next one. Maria, Scholar of Antiquity. 1 red, 1 green. Tap and untapped. Meathook Massacre for 2. Yeah, that's one of them. Maria, Scholar of Antiquity. 1 colorless, 1 red, 1 green. Tap an untapped non-token artifact. You control... Sorry, 1 second. An untapped... tap an artifact you control, add a green. Tap 2 artifacts you control, exile the top card of your library. 3/3 body. This is a weird card. Combo deck? 1 cost artifacts and treasure generators. But you can't... That's the thing. You can't tap tokens. So you can't use... You can't tap treasure to pay her abilities. So treasure doesn't get you anything. Yeah, it does turn them into like semi-card draw. I don't know. I feel like this is a little... I don't think this actually can go infinite as easily then, right? Because there's no... You can't tap tokens for it. Like, it's value on existing stuff, but... The other thing you could probably do with this is just... You tap... I'd have to go look at what the cheap pool... I'd have to go look at what the cheap pool of artifacts that are available in Historic Brawl right now is. Because if you did something like a 1-drop and then 2-drop, then play this on 3, then tap 3 more to do 2 more, you could cheat out something big on like turn 6 or 7, right? It only adds green, though. You have to get a little lucky. There might be a combo deck here, but I guess I'm more concerned about encountering this in some part of just, hey, it's turn 4 and I'm going to play Ulamog. Okay, thanks. Now, Azorbia, some of those were words that I pronounced. 2 colorless, 1 green, 1 blue, 2/4 flying, and it's got domains, so we can just skip that part of it. 2/4 for 4, not as great. Let's just look at this. Whenever it deals combat damage, look at the top X, where X is the number of basic lands. Put up to 1 in your library and the rest in the bottom in random order. Then if there are 5 basic land types and all lands you control, draw a card. Okay, so part of this effect is absolutely worthless in unless you play this in a 5-color deck. I don't think you'd want to play this in a 5-color deck, frankly. That's not true, actually, though, is it? Okay, 1 second. I need to check. So I just realized something that I've been thinking about. I might have been missing something big on domain. Give me just 1 moment. Lands you control are... equal the number of lands you control. Nope. Where are you? Dryad. I'm forgetting on the name of this card. What's that 3-drop that makes lands you control all their basic land types? X number of basic land types among lands you control. Nah, just give me 1 second. There's a card here. There's a card that's relevant. Yeah, the Dryad I'm blanking on the name of. I can't remember the name. Oh, because this... Yeah, so I think that this might be one of those rare situations where... Dryad of the Eleusine Grove. Not Dryad of the Eleusine Groove. That's a different card. I don't want commanders. Every basic land type. So, obviously that's not worth, like, banking around to any extent, but it does exist. So, in theory, Green decks. Green decks and anything that splashes green actually can get all 5. Though I don't think that makes this card much better. This card is probably... This seems mediocre. Maybe you build a flyer deck around it. It's not bad. It's just not incredible. It doesn't do anything on ETB. Its stat line puts it out of Lightning Bolt, but not much else. Yeah, this is a card. It exists. Next one. Najal Stormrunner, 2 blue, 1 red. You may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. That's okay. When he attacks, pay 2. If you do, when you cast your next instant or sorcery this turn, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. That's definitely a card. Doesn't have haste, though. It's a 5-drop. It doesn't have haste. It's going to be kind of expensive to build around. He does... He's in the color that has ways to give stuff haste. I'm going to say interesting, but I think he's just by default weaker. There are other cards in this color that already do this sort of thing, like with Raul Zarek, the Planeswalker. Raul Zarek does that. His -2 lets you copy the next thing you do. I think it does it cheaper. His cost is too high, and the fact that he doesn't have haste makes me think that he's not going to be as good as you might want. And if you wanted to copy big stuff, there's better ways to do it than using him. So I think that's my take on it, is that there's better ways to do what he does in his colors. It's an interesting effect, but there's not as much you can actually pull off with it. All right, Namada, Primal Warden. 2 colorless, a black, a green, 3 for a 4. Reach. If a creature an opponent would die, exile it instead. Always a good effect. When you do, create a 1/1 Saproling. Sack a Saproling to buff himself, sack 2 Saprolings to draw a card. Okay, yeah. We have a actual decent Saproling commander in Historic Brawl now. I think we had a couple other semi-mediocre ones. I think this is probably the new top of that. Being able to exile stuff from your opponent is always good. So it's a decent effect. He doesn't do anything necessarily on entering. He doesn't have trample either, which is a little bit of a bummer. I don't know. I think he's decent. I think he'll be useful. We'll just have to see. What do we got? Queen Alenel of the Rodok. 1 green, 2 white, XX. Equal number of creatures you control. If one or more tokens would be created in control, those tokens plus a 1/1 white soldier creature are created instead. Okay, if you're still in the chat, friend, how do replacement effects stack? Because I'm thinking about this in relation to... Is this even in the right colors for... It might not be. No, it is. So this... How does this work? Does anybody... I wonder how this stacks with, like, Jetmir. Because I don't know how replacement... If you would, instead... I have no idea. Okay, so I'm curious about how this resolves with Ginny Fey, Jetmir's second. Because Ginny Fey is a token replacement. So let's say, if you would create 1 or more tokens, you may instead. Those tokens plus. I think the way it works is that the token gets added. I could be completely wrong here. I think the way this works is that the token gets added, and then you get to change the other type of the token, but I don't think it's an infinite combo. I have no idea, though. Replacement effects are weird. So this could be interesting. This seems... I don't think as a commander this is super fantastic. I think as extra cheddar, extra cheese in maybe Jetmir decks, this will be played. Radha, Coalition Warlord. Again, it's green. Whenever they become tapped, another target creature gets +X for X's number of basic land types alongside you control. 3/3. That seems mediocre. I'm not excited by this card. I'm not filled with joy. Out it goes. Wrath, Weatherlight Stalwart. 1 white, 1 blue. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control. If you do, draw a card. Creature you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. Interesting. So this feels like a token support card. But the one that doesn't generate any tokens. Right? The first Brawl deck you're making from the set, huh? Interesting. I'm wrong? What does he get used for then? He's not token support? Okay, good. I'm so excited to play against your control lists. It just fills me with joy. Joy and thoughtfulness. Either case, he seems interesting. We'll have to see what he gets, what he ends up getting used for. Let's jump ahead a little bit more. Another R and a long name. Radadrabic of Urbog. Okay, oh, I am excited for this guy. 2 colorless, 1 white, 1 black. Vigilance, Ward 2. Good. Other zombies you control have Vigilance. Also good. Whenever a legendary creature you control dies, create a token copy of that creature, except it's not legendary, it's a 2/2 black. Wait, hold up. This is actually better than I thought it was. I thought it was going to be one of the Exile It. It doesn't do that. It just makes copies of legendaries. Interesting. So there's like 2 ways to build this guy, I guess. One is like black zombie tribal, effectively. And the other one is going to be legendaries. I like this guy. I think this guy's going to be neat. And that means he's going to be garbage because I'm way too optimistic about how good cards are. But the fact that he has Ward is also good. He might be a little overcosted at 4. That might make him a little tricky. I think he's cool, though. I do think he's cool. I'm excited to build something with this deck. I don't think we really had a fantastic white-black zombie commanders. Let's see who we've got up next. Rith, Liberated... Oh, God, it's got so many colors. So much text. Rith, Liberated Primeval, 2, 1 red, 1 green, 1 white. Flying, Ward 2. They seem to like sticking Ward onto cards these days to just make them a little bit better. Other dragons you control have Ward 2. Oh, good, because Miriam decks weren't annoying enough as it is. Actually, Miriam's not white. Still. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature or planeswalker an opponent controlled was dealt excess damage this turn, create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. I'm kind of on this, actually. I don't think it's bad. I just don't... There's a weird amount of, like, non-synergy, I guess, is what it feels like. Maybe I'm just not thinking about this because I haven't built, like, a dragon-based deck yet. But Ward is cool, and it makes it so this thing has to be the target of anything you're going to throw at it. But if it is dealt excess damage by what? Dragons are mostly flyers. So if I'm swinging in, I'm going to be... Maybe it's not a dragon commander. Maybe that's what I'm thinking about wrong here. Maybe it's some form of aggro, and this says, hey, you can chump me, and each time you chump me, I am going to get a single 4/4 dragon. Yeah, you only get 1 a turn. All right, let's see who's next. Rivaz of the Claw. 1 colorless, 1 black, 1 red, 3/3. Menace. Add 2 mana in any combination of colors. Spend it only to cast dragons. Once per turn, you may cast a dragon creature spell from your graveyard. When you cast a dragon creature spell from your graveyard, it gains when this card dies. Exile it. So, cheap dragon commander. He seems kind of cool. I think the issue is that the colors that he's in means there's no way to really... There's no way to cheat off that when it dies, exile it, because there's no easy... I don't think black You know, you might be able to do something wonky with that new like mirror that got added, where creatures, when they enter the battlefield, if they're cast, they bounce. That might be useful with him. We'll have to see. So Rivers of the Claw, Rona Shieldrod's Faithful, 1 colorless, 1 blue, 2 black. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, each opponent uses 1 life. You may cast from your graveyard by discarding 2 other cards in addition to paying its other costs. Little mediocre. Not bad. But not... If you have a deck that already wants to discard cards, then maybe this is pretty good, actually. But I don't think there's too many Madness cards currently in Arena, so the pool's a little limited. The effect's not terrible, it's just not... If it was opponent loses life and you gain a life, maybe there's a chip control deck. Like, you can build around this. Not too much, we're just on Rona. So, like, you can build around this, but I don't think... I feel like Keza Augur of Agnes is the better version of this card. No, that's whenever you draw cards. This is whenever you cast. I don't know. I don't love it. I don't think it's bad. There's not enough stuff that gets bonuses off discard that I can think of to make it worth building around this. Maybe a very, like, the controlliest of decks. But in that case, why aren't you running Brawl? Relic Mons, Warren Chieftain. 1 colorless, 1 red, 2 green, 3/3. Menace, whenever, well, it attacks, look at the top card of your library. It's a land, put it onto the battlefield tapped. If you didn't put it onto the battlefield tapped, create a 1/1 red goblin token. Kind of slow, feels kind of understated for a 4-drop. The Menace is okay, but I feel like that means he definitely dies. And it's not whenever you attack, it's whenever he attacks. I'm not very impressed by this. It feels like you'd need to do a lot to build around him and manage it in an effective way. I think he's a little mediocre. Shauna, Purifying Blade. Immortan Joe. Mediocre. I'll find that. Shauna, Purifying Blade. 1 green, 1 white, 1 blue. Lifelink. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay X. If you do, draw X cards. X can't be greater than the amount of life you earn this turn. This seems solid. It's definitely the sort of card you have to build around or the deck's not going to work. I don't think it slots into anything that already exists, but I think it does get... I think it does get played. I think it'll be a decent commander. On Whitehead, there's a lot of good white life gain. Yeah. Yeah, I think it'll be fine. I don't know what the list looks like. I think it'll probably be pretty good. Oh, you know what? Combined this with Wilderness Reclamation, and that's a very annoying little setup that you might have. Oh, God. Alright, what's next? Solkanar the Tainted. 2, 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red, 5/5. Beginning of your end step, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Draw a card. Each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Deals 3 damage up to 1 other target creature or planeswalker. Exile it, then return to the battlefield under an opponent's control. I hate it. This is awful. This is absolutely miserable. Like, it's cool, but... No. Why is this... Wait, why is this Mythic slot? Can you imagine the child that opens this and is just like, alright, time to look at my cards. Oh, I got a Mythic, and they start reading the card and then they get to that last line. If you're gonna... I feel like this should have trample. This should have, like, trample and haste for what it is. But maybe it's not the right colors for those. But this is just awful. Maybe it's better in other formats where it's like, yeah, a creature sticking around for 3 turns isn't going to happen. But this is terrible. I hate it. Alright, next card. Soul of Windgrace. 1, a black, a red, a green, 5/4. Whenever it ETBs or attacks, you may put a land card from a graveyard onto the battlefield tapped under your control. Interesting. 1 green, discard a land card, gain a life. 1 and a red, discard a land card, draw a card. 2 and a black, discard a land card, it gains indestructible until. This seems really good. This seems good. Big kitty. Doesn't really do much with the cat tag, though. I hate that you're suggesting 99 lands in this guy, and I'm like, would that kind of work? Ever ETBs? I think it's probably decent. I don't think this is a terrible card. I think the other thing that's interesting about it, in a very like sort of way, which is to say it's going to be completely irrelevant 99% of the time. It's not a land from your graveyard. It's just a land. This can steal your opponent's Evolving Wilds, or their Fabled whatever. That is interesting to me. Yeah. Yeah. You may put a land card from a graveyard onto the battlefield tapped under your control. Not your graveyard. So this guy could be wonky. He gets a big bonus from the fact that he's a 4-drop. Stats are decent. Yeah, he doesn't have... You're right. There's no slide colors. But the fact that he does something when he ETBs, I think is decent. I think this is another weird one where you'd have to figure out how to build around him. Anyway, Sten, Paranoid Partisan. 1 white, 1 blue. When he enters, choose a card type other than creature or land. Spells with chosen type cost 1 less. Exile, return to the battlefield's control at the end of the next step. Yeah. Let's see. So he has a dodge removal. That's kind of neat. He makes stuff cheaper. That's also kind of neat. I think that's probably pretty decent. Oh, artifact is a card type? Oh, and that will let you make artifact creatures cheaper. That'd be fun. I think he's decent. Alright, Tatiova, Steward of Tides. 2 green, a blue, 3/3. Land creatures you control have flying. That's a... Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if you control 7 or more lands, up to 1 target land you control becomes a 3/3 elemental creature with haste. It's still a land. As a commander, I'm not sure how good this is. As a slot-in to some existing decks, it's kind of okay. It's probably be really good in limited, but I don't give a shit about limited. This is where I need that macro button. Except the macro needs to be, okay, I guess, shouted into the microphone. Alright, who's next? Tori Devant, Fury Rider. 1, 2 red, and a white for a 3/3. Vigilance, Trample, good. Keywords are good. Whenever they attack, all their attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. Other red attacking creatures gain Trample. Untap each other white attacking creature you control. I say the words weenie and aggro a lot when I'm looking at red and white cards, and that's because that's the deck that you make with this sort of thing. I wonder if there's some sort of weird white control deck that you do with this. I don't know. It seems fine. But it doesn't seem too exciting to me. Next up, Tura Kenner. How do you pronounce the umlaut? I'm just going to pronounce it as umlaut. Tura Kenner umlaut D. Sky Knight. 2 colorless, a white, 2 blue, 3/3, flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Why did they just tack on an extra 2 mana to what it feels like this should cost to cast? It's definitely a card. There's nothing exciting about it, but it's there. Urug, Spawn of Turug. Now, this is very exciting for people who play black-green frog decks. Unfortunately, the only frog deck that I'm aware of is blue-green, so sucks to suck. X and 5. Urug, Spawn of Turug's power is equal to the number of land cards in your graveyard. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard. A black and a green sacrifice a land. You gain 2 life. I was expecting to then continue reading this card and read and draw a card, but why would that be there? This is definitely a card. I don't think as a commander it's very good, like you pretty much just said, like chat's saying. I think this slots into Gitrog, maybe. It's a decent power toughness, actually. But I wish that it did more for sacking a land. There's probably something interesting you can do with it. I just don't think that you do that with it as a commander. Mostly because it doesn't have, you may play an additional land or anything to make up for the sacking land. And the sacking a land effect is really lame. Volhar, Voldarian Desecrator. 1 black, 1 blue, and it's a 1/2. Go Volhar! Tap, draw a card, discard a card. If you discard an instant or sorcery this way, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. Oh, 2, sack him. You may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard this turn. If that spell will be put in your graveyard, exile it instead. Activate only as a sorcery. I was really excited through that second block of text, and then I got to the last line, and now I don't care anymore. He's fine. He'll go in black-blue decks. Really would be nice if it wasn't sorcery speed. That'd be cool. Next card. Zara Janin, Scion of Ephera. 3, 1 green, 1 white. 4/4. Domain. Whenever he becomes tapped, put a 1/1 in each card you control with toughness less than the number of basic land types among lands you control. Okay, this is not terrible, actually, because that's probably going to be, what, 2? Most of the time? And I don't think that's actually awful for a weenie deck, right? Turning all of your toughness less than the number of basic lands. Actually, no, it kind of is, because I was thinking that it was going to be on all your... It's less than. Yeah, so he basically just turns stuff into 2/2s. Never mind, I'm no longer interested. I was excited when I thought this was going to be, hey, turn your 1/1s into a 3/3. But now that it's turn your 1/1s into a 2/2, I'm less excited. He might still get used. Maybe in decks that have a couple extra colors. Or really want to pump stuff, but that's a pretty conditional effect since he basically has to attack for it. Alright, Zur, Eternal Schemer. I like the art for this card. Don't know anything else about it. 1 white, 1 blue, 1 black. I actually want to know what the heck this character's lore is. Flying, enchantment creatures you control. Why? No. No. Why is this printed? Okay, well, good news, everybody who likes playing against Go Shintai. Guess what I bet is going to get added to that list the second it becomes a thing. So much fun. Target non-aura enchantment you control becomes a creature and base power and toughness equal to its mana value. Oh. As a commander, I'm not like, yeah, I hate this. I'm like, this card is perfectly fine. As a, this card goes into 5-color Go Shintai, and now all of a sudden they have a second thing that gives everything Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof. I'm less enthusiastic. This would get played in shrines, right? Like, I feel like this would. I feel like this is a good shrine card. Especially because it has effectively a dodge targeted removal. Because it turns an enchantment into a creature, and since it's an enchantment creature, it then gets hexproof. I think this is decent. I think this is a good card. I hate it. Karn, Living Legacy. Create a tapped Power Stone token. It's an artifact with tap, add 1. Mana can't be spent to cast them on artifact spell. -1. Pay any amount of mana. Look that many cards from top of your library. Put one of those into your hand. The rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. -7. You get an emblem with tap an untapped artifact you control. This emblem deals 1 damage to any target. This seems awful. Like, no. This seems awful. As a commander, colorless commanders just don't really work. I've tried them before, but they don't. That emblem is really unimpressive. Like, maybe in an artifact deck that does a bunch of proliferate, but I just feel like if you have the resources to cheat that emblem out somehow, there are so many better emblems that do more than this. And as a colorless spell, in terms of, hey, I want to slot this into other decks, it doesn't slot into anything other than artifact decks. Maybe you play this in green ramp decks, and you use the -1 to dig for answers. Maybe that's where this... Maybe I'm looking at the wrong abilities. Maybe the -1 is where this card is at, but I'm not looking at this and going, oh, hey, it's a new Ugin. All right, I think we're going into the monocolored cards. All right, Squee, Dubious Monarch. I don't like this card because I like normal Squee better, but we'll go over it anyway. 2 and a red, 2/2. Haste. Whenever Squee attacks, trade a 1/1 red goblin token that's tapped and attacking. You may cast Squee Dubious Monarch from your graveyard by paying 3 colorless or red and exiling 4 other cards from your graveyard rather than paying its mana cost. Yeah. I think this is a... Alright, so I'm supposed to be looking at these objectively. Objectively, I don't love this as a... Like, the obvious commander... Obviously, the obvious use of this card is as a commander for red goblins, right? Or slotting into red goblins. As a slot-in for red goblins, I think this is actually pretty decent, right? It's 3/3 in stats with haste, right? That's decent. And also, if you need an extra body to pull out onto the board in, like, the last second, you exile 4 cards and pull it out. As a commander, I don't like it very much. It doesn't have, like, a big tribal effect. It doesn't really do a fantastic job. 1 second. Do I have... Yes, I do have water. I refilled it. It doesn't do anything for goblins that's super special. As a slot-in, yeah, it's useful. It's a good card to slot in. Right? Because it just sits in there somewhere that's like, hey, you get 2 more goblins. Cool. As a commander, it doesn't do enough. It doesn't do enough. It doesn't let you spend goblins to do stuff. I also don't like this card because lore-wise, I kind of like Squee. I like Squee lore-wise because of how his lore is represented in his mechanics. So for anybody who doesn't know, there's a card called Squee the Immortal, and I love it as a card because... I'll just pull it up and read the rules text real quick. Yeah. You may cast Squee the Immortal from your graveyard or exile. That's his entire effect, right? And it is so perfect because I love the idea of a card that is just literally unstoppable. There is no way in black bordered Magic to permanently remove Squee from the game. No matter what, you can still just keep casting him. And this version feels like a worse version of that because he doesn't come back from exile, just from your graveyard, and you have to pay a massive cost to do so. Next, Jaya, Fiery Negotiator. I don't know if my viewers are back yet, but hey, they don't give a shit about Planeswalkers. That's fine. Create a 1/1 red monk creature token with prowess. That seems good. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. Choose one of them. You can play that card this turn. Whenever a target creature opponent controls it. Whenever you attack this turn, Jaya, Fiery Negotiator deals damage equal to the number of attacking creatures equal to that. That seems decent. You get an emblem with whenever you cast a red instant or sorcery spell, copy it twice. You may choose new targets for the copies. Okay. As a standalone card for a commander, this is one of those cards where it feels like it's pulling in 2 different directions. This feels like it wants to be used in some form of prowess aggro deck. But prowess is a weird mechanic, because prowess means that you are planning to commit to playing both creatures and playing instants and sorceries at the same time. So it's always kind of a split. You're trying to do two things at once, but you're still trying to do aggro, but you're going to be doing it with both things, and it's hard to know if you're actually going to have the cards for it. As a card that gets played in something like Super Friends or maybe blue, as like a blue-red card, right? If this gets played in a blue-red deck, I can see this being played in other lists and being pretty good, because it's like look at cards, some form of semi-targeted removal, an emblem that if you get it off is actually pretty decent, right? In like in those sort of longer form control decks. But on its own, I don't love it. I don't love it very much. Next up, okay, so I want to rant about this card for a minute, but first let's go over what it does, and then everybody else can just mute, and then you can listen to me go and turn it back on when I go to the next card. Shield of Dread the Apocalypse. 2 colorless, 2 black. Death Touch. Whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. 4/5. I kind of hate this card, and let me explain why in context, right? So this is the 4th of the Praetors we've seen so far, right? Praetors? I'm mispronouncing it. Whatever. The thing that I like about Praetors from a... I'll call it from a design perspective, right? Is that the Praetors are a cycle. If you go and look at even the old ones, you can pretty much see that. What they tend to do is they have some sort of massive big effect. They do something big for you, and they do something to screw your opponent, right? And I'm just going to go see if I can find... So I just want to have them pulled up while I'm trying to explain why I don't like this one. Is it spelled with a P-R-A, Praetor? Collected, not collected. Phyrexian. Maybe if I do that. No cards. Okay. Why is none of my... Oh. Turn that filter off. Because I'm looking in 3-drops, and none of them are 3-drops. Praetor. Okay. I've got all of them up right now. And so I'm mostly looking at some of the other older effects. But let's look at blue, right? We'll start with blue. We'll go through the rest of them. There's only... Well, we'll start with white, actually. We'll start with Elesh Norn, because this is going to be a little bit of a rant. Elesh Norn. Vigilance, 4/7, 7-drop. Other creatures you control get +2/+2. Creatures your opponents control get -2/-2. The stat effect itself is not huge, but it's a 4-stat swing, and it just cleans tokens off the board, right? It's this big, massive effect on a big white creature. It's this big, really cool effect. Next up, Jin-Gitaxias. Both versions. Core Augur version is a 10-drop. At the beginning of your end step, draw 7 cards. Each opponent's hand size is reduced by 7. Big, massive, game-shattering effect. Massive mana cost, but... It's also got flash, I should mention. But if you get this out, you can burn your opponent's entire hand while pulling 7 more cards each turn. It's a big thing. Jin-Gitaxias Progress Tyrant. It's only a 7-drop, but whenever you cast an artifact, instant, or sorcery, copy that spell. You can choose new targets. Whenever your opponent casts artifact, instant, or sorcery, counter it, right? It's this big, cool effect, right? It does something big and unique and interesting. Urabrask is a little bit terrible, but Urabrask the Hidden. Creatures you control have haste. Creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped, right? Urabrask's actually kind of shafted in both versions of him. But again, like it's a bigger effect. Urabrask Heretic Praetor. Basically says at the beginning of your turn, exile a card you cast till end of turn. At the beginning of your opponent's turn, when they would draw, instead they could draw a card and can only exile it to the end. Urabrask's kind of more on the weaker side of things. Vorniclex Monstrous Raider. If you'd put counters on something, double them. If your opponent would put counters on something, half it. Has also a bunch of really cool interactions with things like sagas, right? Or stuff that you wouldn't really think about with counters. But it's this big shaking effect. It's this big impactful effect. The Praetors come out and they do something big, massive, and cool. And they're very highly statted. Vorniclex Voice of Hunger. When you tap a land for mana, add 1 more mana. When your opponent taps land, it doesn't untap at their next untap step, right? And then finally, we have the old version of Shilodrod. 7-drop, gets played a fair amount. Swamp Walk. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. No conditions. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. Big, massive card. Okay, so in my mind, like, there's a clear design. Like, sorry, I went back to that for a second. There's a clear design pattern for the Praetors, which is they have an effect that says you do something and your opponent does something. The one thing that happens to your opponent is like a mirrored version of yours, right? Vornaclex doubles your tokens, halves theirs. Jin-Gitaxias makes you draw a bunch of cards, makes your opponent have no hand. Shilodrod resurrects things and for you and kills things for your opponent. Elish Norn buffs your stuff and weakens your opponent's stuff. The point is they're all these really big, awesome cards that have awesome effects. This is not a bad card. From a just general standpoint of it, okay, it's a 4/5 for 4, with whenever you draw a card you gain life, whenever your opponent draws a card they lose life. It's good. It's fine. But this is supposed to be, like... It just feels like it's a well-statted card that does something decent, but it's not awe-inspiring, right? It's not epic. It's just good, right? It's like Goldspan. I'd say, let me compare it to a second for Gold to Goldspan Dragon, right? You look at Goldspan Dragon and you go, this is really good. But you're not like, there's no sense of majesty to it. There's no sense of like, oh crap to it, right? It's like, oh yeah, that's really good. This is a really good card. It will probably be perfectly fine as a monocolor commander. It will probably be perfectly useful in a bunch of other decks. But it's not astounding. It's a very, very dull effect, right? I'm not saying it's not an impactful effect or not a meaningful effect. It's absolutely a meaningful effect. It's absolutely a good card. But it's not an exciting card. You look at this and you go, yep, okay. Yeah, your opponent plays it and you go, yep, okay. And then you play a removal spell on it, right? But your opponent doesn't play it, you don't look at it and you go, oh crap. And to that extent, right, like, I consider this kind of a miss for me personally. Like, I just don't enjoy this card very much because I don't think it's, like, awesome, right? I think it's very good. But it doesn't have... Not all the Praetors are actually very good cards, right? Like, they're very powerful cards, but Jin-Gitaxias is a 10-drop. Like, Core Augur, that's a 10-drop. That's 100% a Timmy card, right? Progress Tyrant, 7-drop, still kind of a Timmy card. Elish Norn, 7-drop. Shilodrod, 7-drop. Vornaclex, 6-drop. Vornaclex Voice of Hunger, 8-drop. This is a 4-drop. It's just a good card, but it's not exciting. And that's why I don't like it very much. It deserves Mythic, right? But it deserves Mythic because of its power level as a card. If you took away the fact that this was supposed to be Shilodrod, right? Like, you can't see it, but I'm covering it on my screen. If you took away its naming and stuff like that, it'd be like, yeah, that's kind of cool. But you can't name a card the Apocalypse, make it a 4/5 that just, like, saps some life and be like, alright, yeah, we're done, this is fine, this is cool. Anyway, enough ranting, you can now unplug your ears. The Raven Man. Actually, this is another one where I could rant about, like, hey, we've got this cool character that we've hinted at in lore for years. We're going to make him into a card. He's a 2/1. He makes birds. Okay, cynicism aside, as a commander, I think he might be kind of fun. As a... I can think of more things to do with him in decks that he would slot into, because he has some discard effects, and he synergizes well with Tegrid, and who's that 3/3? Who's that 1/3 demon with Death Touch? He synergizes well with an alchemy-only card that I'm forgetting the name of. In making people discard stuff, he also creates just little chippers, which are also nice, even if they can't block. He's a perfectly good card. He's probably decent as a 2-drop. As a commander, you can probably build around him pretty easily, because most of your opponent discards 2 cards are in the 3 or 4 drop slot. Lore-wise, as for what he is, he's just not as impressive to me. But I think he's probably fine as a command. He'll be fine in like some form of mono black commander. If nothing else, he'll be interesting, which at least is good. All right, Liliana of the Veil. I think this might be a reprint. Let me check. Is this a reprint? Of the Veil. Liliana. I can't spell Liliana. Okay, yes, this is a reprint, but we're talking about Historic Brawl. This is not a reprint for Historic Brawl. As such, how do I feel about it? As a commander, it's perfectly fine but very dull commander, I think, is my brief take on this, right? Again, we don't have too much stuff that synergizes with discard, but this probably slots in quite well to certain other decks. In terms of its -2, target player sacrifices a creature, that's good. That's removal that gets around indestructible. So if they've only got one thing out, that's fine. As a commander, I don't think it'll be amazing as a commander. As a card that slots into other decks, it'll probably be pretty decent. It'll probably be played. The fact that it's very cheap in being only a, it's only a 3-drop, right? That's pretty good. All right. I lost my thingamabob. Let me go to the next one. Braid's Arisen Nightmare. 1 colorless, 2 black, 3/3. At the beginning of your end step, you may sack an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a type without. For each opponent who doesn't do that, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. Interesting. I'm pretty sure this is a new card. I think this falls in the same category, but so as a commander, right? You're looking at this in mono black. Obviously, the easiest way to abuse this effect is to sack tokens. Black doesn't have a huge amount of token generation, so I don't think this is super good. There's another important part of this as well. As a slot into other decks, it's probably fine. It's probably kind of decent. I can see it slotting into maybe black-white tokens, or weirdly enough, slotting into black-green land sack or something like that, where you want to sacrifice your own lands and you want your opponent to be like, all right, fine, have a card. The other thing that's, I think, pretty obvious about looking at this card, if you look at it for just a second. 1 second. I need to see if... sorry, I need to mute that real quick. The other thing that I think is pretty obvious about this card is that this is way better in actual commander, right? For each opponent who doesn't do that, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. So that is way, 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 way better. Sorry, I just need to check to see if somebody is... I don't know that number, so I'm going to assume it's fine. And I'll call them back later. But yeah, this is much better in actual commander. In Historic Brawl, though, the fact that you've got a limited number of opponents, the fact that black doesn't have a huge amount of token production, and you just end up with a card that's like, yeah, it's fine. It'll probably be slotted in, but I don't see it being incredible. Danitha, Benalius, Hope, First Strike, Vigilance, Lifelink, 4/4 for 5. When it ETBs, you may put an aura or equipment from your hand to the graveyard. Oh. Okay, so this, as a commander on its own, mono white aura or mono white equipment, I don't think is incredible. It's got a lot of nice keywords. But again, mono white doesn't have a huge number of fantastic ways to burn cards out of their hand, right? Without actually playing them first. In something like red-white, right? And that's sort of, I think I mentioned it a few times already. In red-white equipment, this might be interesting, because red has a bunch of ways to discard cards, and there might be some cool stuff that you can cheat into play. Give me 1 second. I want to do a quick search. What do we have for... Nope. I want enchantment. I want expensive enchantments. I'm just trying to think what are the... if there's any real expensive... enchantments or equipment. Okay, so okay, I can't find a good card for this, but here's an interesting thought experiment. What happens if you try? What happens if you? So I'm assuming something that says enchant player can't enchant a creature, so you can't return. Yeah, right? So you probably can't return other... Okay, I think you probably can't return any of those big ones. Are there any other massive enchantments? Not really. Maybe there's something in green, like Colossification or Prestigious Growth, but there aren't a lot of really big, expensive aura enchantments. Maybe one of the bigger pieces of equipment then would probably be what you'd end up using this for. But anyway, yeah, so this is the last commander. So if you want to just run away now, because you've seen all the new commanders, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to go through the rest of the cards next, so everything that's not a legendary. Thanks for stopping by. If you like my stuff, please hit the subscribe thing. I mostly just do a lot of historic Brawl decks. Yes, I'm legally obligated to say that, or else YouTube just comes and caps me. The lick the script thing. Alright, everything else, everyone else. Anointed Peacekeeper. 2 colorless, 1 white, 33. Enters the battlefield, look at a hand, choose a card name. Okay, yeah, this might see play, actually. This is a... This is, again, it's the spell whatever, dude. Spell Weaver. You can make your opponent's commander more expensive. This will probably see some play. It's also Human Cleric, so it might slot into either party-based decks, which we have a couple of, and it can slot into human decks. It's a perfectly reasonable card with a perfectly reasonable stat line that also has a useful ability. It'll probably be played. Archangel of Wrath. Okay. So here's one thing I want to talk about that I don't think we saw in any of the commander cards since Kicker's in this set. Kicker colors are part of the card's color identity. That means that Archangel of Wrath can't be played in Historic in anything that isn't a red, black, white deck. I can't think of any popular red, black, white decks. So you kick it for 6 and it deals 4 damage. I don't think the stat line is high enough to justify this card. If it was mono white or if it kicked with white, then I can see it getting played in existing Gidia decks. But because you can only play it in a 3-color deck and it's a 3-floor flying lifelink, I don't know who this card synergizes with off the top of my head, which is why I can't look at it and be like, oh yeah, what a fantastic card. Because I can't think of a good, like, card in this colors that's going to get played. And that'll be true of a fair number of these kicker cards. Aggravating Cavalier. So we may as well discuss the other mechanic that got added for the set. 2/2. Wedded ETBs. Create a 1/1 white soldier creature. Enlist. As this creature attacks, you may tap a non-attacking creature you control without summoning sickness. When you do, add its power to this creature until end of turn. This is an interesting thing. So basically, this can come in and function as a 3/3, even though it's going to have its stats split across 2 bodies. Enlist is kind of neat. I guess Knight Tribal technically exists, but it's really crappy. So you could add this to Knight Tribal. It's decent. You could add this to White Weenies. Maybe do something tricky with it. It's fine. I don't... So for these cards, right, we're not looking at them on a mediocre, non-mediocre sort of scale. Instead, the thing I'm asking myself is, what does this do? Where does this slot in, right? And like White Weenie or something that wants to do some white token production might do it, but I feel like there's better options. Admittedly, not options that are maybe as cheap. The Enlist definitely makes it kind of interesting because you can turn this into a fairly big creature, but I don't look at this and go, oh, I know where this slots. Aggravating Felix costs 1 less for each creature you control, 4/4 for Vigilance. Again, Weenie deck, it's fine, not too much to say here. Artillery Blast. Instant. Deals X to tapped target creature, where X is 1 plus number of basic land types. Very mediocre. This might go into high land color decks, but the fact that it's a X damage, where who knows what X is going to be, and the target creature has to be tapped, means that this strikes me as the sort of card that goes into your 5-color limited deck more than anything else. Vanellish Faithbonder, Vigilance, Enlist. There's nothing to say about this card. It definitely exists. The fact that it's got the Cleric subtag might be useful for something. Vanellish Sleeper. Ooh, now we're getting the fun stuff. Black-White, Kicker. If it was kicked, each player sacks a creature. I don't think this is a... Okay, so we already have a lot of 3-drops that do when this ETB's sack, right? Actually, and they have the exact same stat line in... Okay, so this is interesting. So this card's effect, I think, is better than some of the other cards it might be played with, right? So this is technically a upgrade in terms of effect over Demon Disciple, because you can play it for cheaper and do less with it, but it's got 2 extra colors. I don't know if Black-White wants to run this. I am a little mediocre. One second. I am starting to lose my voice because I don't talk to normal human beings outside of the stream. Kicker. But yeah, it's fine. It might be slotted. I don't think it's going to be incredible. Captain's Call. Create 3 1/1 white soldier tokens. Meh. We've got cards that do this. Now we have another card that also do this. It's not instant speed. I don't care. Charismatic Vanguard. A lot of these, there's not too much to say on them. They don't do anything super exciting. They don't redefine too much stuff. Citizen's Arrest. We've got a new exile until it leaves. This will be good for white control decks. Cleaving Skyrider. White-red. If it is kicked, it deals X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. This might actually see play. This might see some play. A 6-drop to deal like an extra 6 damage to any target is pretty decent. Clockwork Drawbridge, Defender, tap target creature. There's only one Defender commander that I'm currently aware of. I don't know if this would slot into that deck. I guess it's a 0. It's not bad. We might. Coalition Sky Knight, Flying Enlist. Yep, perfectly fine. Enlist is interesting. Might get played. It's a 4-drop. No, this won't get played. Defiler of Faith. Okay, now we're into rares. 5-drop. Vigilance. Okay, this is important. So this is one of the cards I think will be played. This is part of the Defiler cycle. There are 5 of these cards, 1 for each color. I was actually thinking about pulling them out just to focus on them for a little bit. But the TLDR version is they make it so that you can pay 2 life instead of 1 mana of the color that the cycle they're in. So this is white, so you can pay 2 life instead of 1 white mana to cast a spell. I think these guys are good. I think they will probably be played. As if nothing else in Historic Brawl, because making stuff cheaper is good, and also whenever you cast a white permanent spell, create a 1/1 white soldier token. That part's not as important. Being able to spend life to make stuff cheaper, that is important. I think they might be used in most of the colors that have access to them. Destroy Evil, reprint. Griffin Protector. Whenever another creature enters your control, gets 1/1 till end of turn. It's a 4-drop, nothing special here. Something white weenies. Guardian of Nubenalia, Enlist. Whenever it enlists, scry 2. It's a 2/2. Discard a card, gets indestructible. This seems very good. This seems very good, fairly useful. I think white weenies like it. Lets you use a body that just dropped as extra chunking power, and it scries for you at the same time. This will be played. Heroic Charge, Kicker for red. For Keld, for Benalia. 2/1, spells kicked, they gain trample. At 6, that's pretty expensive. I don't expect to see this played, because if you're running white-red aggro, by the time turn 6 comes around, you want to have already been beating somebody into pulp. Join Forces. I feel like this is already... Is this already a reprint? Regardless, it's not an exciting enough effect for me to be like, yeah, I'll see it every single game. Juniper Order Root Weaver. White, green. When it's kicked, put a 1/1 counter on a creature target you control. Again, it'll only go into green-white decks, and because it only goes into green-white decks, we might as well just read this as 3, put a 1/1 on it for a 2-drop. Nothing's... I don't think it does its job better than any other card that already enters and puts 1/1 counters on stuff. Knight of Light's Dawn. If you gain life, you gain that much life plus 1 instead. This will be played most likely. I don't know what deck exactly, but there's a lot of decks that like to gain extra life. This will be another slot in for those, or it could be a cheap replacement, but this will be played. Leyline Binding. Domain. This card goes in 5-color Golos, and not much else. Okay, read ahead. So the new sagas, you can start with that many lore counters. Skipped chapters don't trigger. Sacrifice after 3. Everything else with them is the same. You and target opponent each draw 2 cards. Create a 1/1 bird with flying. Put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. It's interesting because it's card draw in white. It's not as interesting because it's kind of dull. Mesa Cavalier. We have cards that do this. They also exist. Phyrexian Missionary. Black-white. If it's kicked, turn target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. It doesn't immediately slot in, but it's perfectly usable as a card. It might have some value. Prayer of Binding. There's a lot of exile stuff. It's got flash. Maybe it'll get seen in control decks, actually, because it enters. It can cast whenever you want. Resolute Reinforcements. It's fine. I don't... So, there's a very good Adelane list in Historic Brawl. I don't know if this is good enough to be put into that list. That's where it would go, though. Runic Shot. Blue-white. Destroy target tapped creature. If it was kicked, scry 2. It might go into some control. No, it won't, because this is sorcery speed. Wow, that's awful. It's not a terrible card. I feel like there are better cards for what it does. Are there? This might be decent, actually. Just it's so cheap. Samite Herbalist. Whenever it becomes tapped, gain 1 life, scry 1. Nothing too special here. Unless you are going to crew a bunch of vehicles, which I don't think you'd necessarily want to use this for. I don't see too much you do with this, other than just play it normal. Sarah Paragon, Mythic. Once during each of your turns, you may play a land from your graveyard or cast a permanent spell with mana value 3 or less. If you do, it gains when this permanent is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, exile it, and you gain 2 life. White Weenie Finisher, maybe? Shally's Acolyte. So it can only be played in green-white. No, this card's terrible. A 3/4 that can maybe be a 5/6 if you spend, let's see, 7 mana on it is awful. And the fact that it, even if it's an 8, no, it's just not happening. Stall for Time. Tap it to 2 creatures. If the spell is kicked, put a stun, draw a card. Yes, this will probably be played. It's a neat cantrip. It's a useful cantrip. Stun is a new, interesting mechanic, so I think people will experiment with it. This seems useful, potentially. Take up the shield. Put a 1/1 on target creature. It gains lifelink and indestructible. Maybe it gets paid and played in Feather the Redeemer, honestly. Temporary Lockdown. Wow, this set has a lot of exile stuff. As a cheap board wipe in white, yes, this will probably be played in control decks. Urza Assembles the Titans. Scry 4. If it's a Planeswalker, put it into your hand. You may put a Planeswalker mana value 6 or less from your hand onto the battlefield. You may activate the loyalty. Planeswalker support gets played in Super Friends. Valiant Veteran. Other soldiers get +1/+1. Okay, so Soldier Tribal. Exile it, put a 1/1 on each soldier. I don't know to what extent Soldier Tribal is an actual thing as a Historic Brawl deck. As a standard deck, I expect to see this card 8 million times. Wingmantle Chaplain. ETBs, create a bird. Whenever another creature ETBs, create a bird. Oh no, it's only for defenders. Also, this card looks kind of like Jesus, which is a little odd. I don't... I don't think it gets played. Academy Lore Master. Pair may draw an additional card if they do. Spells cost 2 more to cast. So every deck that likes to play Omniscience is going to run this. In all honesty, this is useful in control decks because, like, you're just going to be casting your spells on their turn anyway. Why do you give a shit if you can't cast a spell on your turn? Academy Wall, more defender. That's kind of useful. Probably won't see aggressive play, but maybe in some instant sorcery decks it'll let you stall a little bit. Aether Channeler. Yeah, this will be played because it does everything. Turn another non-land permanent to its owner's hand or draw a card. I think this will be played. It's also a good clone target, actually. Battle in Mystics. Blue-red. This might actually get played. Discard your hand and draw 2 cards is a pretty good effect. Combat Research. As long as enchanted creature is legendary, it's +1/+1 in ward. This might get played. This seems decent. Coral Colony. Mill. Defender Mill. I don't think there's currently a Defender Mill list that exists, and as such, I am skeptical of this card being used. Defiler of Dreams. Second card in the Defiler set. Again, I feel like blue probably likes this. And also this one is whenever you cast a blue permanent spell, draw a card. I feel like this will be played in blue control decks. Paying life instead of mana is a very good effect. Gina the Fountain. Whenever you cast instant or sorcery, it gets +1/+1. Bounce it or scry 1. No. It's not going to be played. Not good enough. Etri's Scorn. Costs 1 less if your opponent has cast 2 or more spells this turn. Counter target spell. Actually, probably pretty useful because it's 1 blue less, which means this is not quite a negate, but yeah, I think it'll be played. I think this is a good counter spell. I like this. Essence Scatter, reprint. Founding the Third Path. It's got read ahead. Cast an ETB without cast spell. Target player rolls 4. Exile. Oh. Oh no, this isn't as hideous as I thought it was. I was looking at this and I was like, wait, you just get to cast an instant or sorcery from your graveyard? But no. You get to cast a copy, which means you still have to pay the cost for it. It's not bad though. Probably will be played because of read ahead, since you can just cast this and it's basically a 2 mana return target instant or sorcery and cast it once if you pay the rest of its cost. So this I think will be played. It seems useful. Frostfist Strider. Ward for 2. When it ETBs, tap and stun. Stun is neat. I don't see giant decks loving this or any other deck really being like, yeah, I totally need this card. It's just a little overcosted. If it was a 3-drop, maybe it'd be more played. Haughty Djinn, equal the number of instant sorceries. Instant sorcery costs 1 less. Yes, this will be played. Anything that makes instant and sorceries cheaper, instant sorceries decks love, and this also comes as a beater. Probably red-blue would be my guess. Or just Esper. Okay, next card. Haunting Figment. Can't be blocked as long as you cast an instant or sorcery. Vigilance. If this had spirit subtyping, then I'd be like, yeah, that's probably a thing. but it doesn't. It actually has illusion subtyping, which seems a little weird because most of the time illusions have a trigger word on them for when it becomes the target of an instant or sorcery, you sack it, and this doesn't. So that's neat, useless trivia. But I don't see too many decks being like, yes, I absolutely need this. Doesn't even have flying either. Yeah, this is pretty bad. Impede momentum, yes. I mean, I'm sorry. Stunning something, saying, hey, this doesn't untap for 3 turns in blue. Just buy yourself 3 turns of stalling out your opponent's commander. That's fantastic. Yes, it's sorcery speed. Who cares? It's still good. It also scries. Impulse. Yes. Maybe not necessarily in strict blue decks, but this seems pretty decent. This seems like a cracked out version of Opt a little bit. Joint exploration, so blue, green. Scry, then draw a card. If it was kicked, you may put a land. Instant speed, so I want to say yes, this might see some play actually. Because just because it's instant speed. If this was sorcery speed, absolutely not. At instant speed, all of a sudden this is actually pretty decent to cast at the end of your opponent's turn. Micromancer. Search your library for an instant sorcery mana of 1. Reveal, put in your hand, shuffle. There's probably a combo deck that uses this. I don't know what that combo deck is. As such, I don't see this being played. Negate. It's a reprint. Phasing of Zarfir. Another land on permanent phases out. It can't phase in for as long as you control Phasing of Zarfir. Destroy all creatures. For each creature destroyed this way, its controller creates a 2/2 black Phyrexian creature token. Okay, yeah, it's a board wipe. Yes, this will be played. It's a sorcery speed board wipe. That's fine. But it's a board wipe in blue, sort of. I still think it gets played. Phyrexian Espionage, blue-black. Draw 2 cards. If the spell was kicked, opponent discards. It's a 5-drop. No, it's way too expensive. 3 mana to draw 2 cards at sorcery speed is not impressive. 5 mana to draw 2 cards and your opponent discards a card is really unimpressive. Black-blue decks have better tools than this. Pixie Illusionist. Green-blue kicker. If it was kicked, it gets 2/2. This is another card that does that weird thing where technically this lets you manipulate stuff for domain effects. I don't know that fairies currently have a problem with that, though, or that there are any fairy lists that need this effect. I'm not impressed with it right now. Protect the Negotiators. Blue, white. If it was kicked, create a soldier. Counter target spell unless its controller plays 1 for each creature you control. Okay, so this is a weird card because this is effectively a blue-white aggro card. And it raises that valuable question of if you're playing blue-white aggro, why are you playing counter spells? I don't think it'll be used. Watch this card become like the most played counter spell. I can see that sort of happening. Rona's Vortex. Turn target creature or planeswalker you don't control to its owner's hand. If the spell was kicked, put that permanent on the bottom of its library instead. So most of the existing kicker cards, I think this will be played, actually. Oh, no, it won't, because you can only play this in blue-black. I don't think this is going to be played. It's sort of cheap planeswalker removal, but not really. Maybe it gets played because it's instant speed. It's kind of a weird one to judge, honestly. Shore Up. 1/1 game's hexproof. Untap it. It's just a better version of Dive Down, or some of the other cards that are kind of like that. Decks that already have it might think about this as an option because it actually gives power and toughness. Or it actually gives power as opposed to just toughness. Silver Scrutiny. If it had flash, if X is 3 or less, draw X cards. 5 for drawing 3. It'll probably be played because of just what it does, right? extra draw is useful, and it's instant speed as long as it's under a 5-drop. So, yeah, I think it'll be played. Soaring Drake. Blah, 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 blah. Sphinx of Clear Skies. Flying, ward 2 for a 5/5, so that looks promising. Whenever it deals combat damage, reveal the top X, where X is the number of basic. Oh, it's domain. Huh. So a really good effect tied to domain. It basically says draw 2. In a 3-color deck, I think this is decent. It's not the worst bomb ever, and ward does give it some value, but I don't love it in other situations. Talas, look out. When it dies, look at top 2, put 1 in your hand, 1 to graveyard, 4-drop flying. No. I don't. I think that for the stat line is bad. It's not a powerful enough effect. The fly for what it does, the mana cost, and I don't think Pirate Tribal needs a card like this. I could be dead wrong. Tidepool Turtle, tap 2, scry 1, 4-drop for a 2/5. Probably not going to be played, honestly. Timely Interference, blue-red. Nah, probably not, even though it's a cantrip. Tolarian Geyser. If they don't drown, perhaps they'll rust. Blue-white. This card is just not as good as other cards that do the same thing. No, it's not going to be played, especially at sorcery speed. Tolarian Terror. 1 last for each instant or sorcery. Ward 2. No. No. So, as always, good stats on something, even if you can play it cheaply, is not enough for Historic Brawl. Vesuvian Diplomacy. Whenever you cast a spell that targets only a single artifact or creature you control, create a token that's copy that artifact or creature, except it's not legendary. Yes. I don't know what deck yet, but yes. This would be very annoying, actually, in Go Shintai. Voda Sea Scavenger. When it ETBs, look at the top X, where X is domain. Put 1 into your top of your library, put the rest in the bottom. It's a worse version of Thassa's Oracle that doesn't have a win con strapped to it. I'd be surprised. I think there's better Merfolk, and I think that most Merfolk decks are only 1 or 2 colors, which means this is pretty shitty. Voldarian Mindsinger. Again, we go back to that problem of this is a cool card, but it only gets played in blue, green, red. When it ETBs, gain control of target creature with power less than Voldarian Mindsinger's power for as long as you control Voldarian Mindsinger. No, I don't think this is going to be played. It's just not a good enough card. Volsci Tide Turner. I feel like this is almost a reprint, but maybe Merfolk decks use it. I don't think so, though. Aggressive Sabotage. We are through, let's see, so we're through white, green, yeah. That is why you're simping for this card. Anyway, Aggressive Sabotage. Target player discards 2 cards. If the spell was kicked, it deals 3 damage to that player. Again, we come back to the whole problem that we've had with some of this other stuff, where this can only go in a red-black deck. I don't know what red-black deck he's going to go. Yes, this is totally what I need. Balduvian Atrocity. Phyrexian Berserker. Kicker, again, black-red. When it ETBs, return target creature with 3 or less. It gains haste, sack it. That's actually not a terrible effect. That's a pretty decent effect. This might actually get played, I think. I can see this being used. Battle Rage Blessing, Death Touch, and Indestructible. I mean, maybe. The thing is that there's a lot of cards that already sort of do stuff like this, or that like resurrect cards out of the graveyard when they die, or things like that. But this seems... I don't hate it. I don't love it. Battlefly Swarm gains Death Touch until end of turn. Maybe. It's kind of useful, honestly. It's a very, very cheap Death Touch creature. That can actually see some play, especially since it can serve as a chump blocker in the air. Blight Pile. Again, we go back to I think there's only one Defender deck currently in this archetype, and I don't think that this is this is a card that goes into that deck. Bone Splinters. It's a reprint. Braid's Fight Full Return. You may sack a creature, return target creature, target opponent may sack. This is pretty mediocre. I don't... Non-lands, non-token permanent. If they don't, they lose 2 life and you draw a card. Yeah, no. Choking Miasma. There's a lot of cards that already do this. They don't... this is green-black. The kicker is pretty shitty. No. Cruelty of Gix. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose creature planeswalker. They discard that card. Search your library for a card. Put it into your hand. You shuffle. Put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. There's a bunch of really good effects on this saga, but it's pretty highly costed, so it probably gets played in control decks if it's going to get used. It might still be played, but it feels like it gets played as a bomb if it's going to be used. Cult Conscript. 1 drop. Enters tapped. Return to the battlefield. Activate only if a non-skeleton... So this is just an even worse version of existing skeletons. No. No. It's not going to be played. Cut Down. Probably. It's just a worst version of that. It's a worse version of a card that currently exists. But I feel like it does enough that it's worth considering. Especially since it's instant speed, not sorcery speed. It's tough to judge, though, right? Because since it's 5 total stats that you get to remove, it's hard to say if that's going to be enough or just not enough at all. Defiler of Flesh. Another one in the Defiler cycle. Black has no problems paying life instead of mana. Yes, this will be played. Whenever you cast a black permanent spell, target creature control gets +1 in menace until end of turn. That's actually kind of a pretty terrible effect, but yes, I can see this being played. Drag to the Bottom. Domain for X, or X1 number of basic lands. Golos will play this. Nobody else will. It's a perfectly decent, like, kind of just... Actually, it's perfectly decent as sort of a... Maybe 3-color decks that splash black play it. It's perfectly decent as a stand-in for something like Languish. So we're getting more of those cards now. I think it's decent. Eerie Soul Tender. Mills. Exile it. Return another creature. Probably won't be used. The stat line is not great, but at least the effect is not sorcery speed. Actually, I don't know. This is a really hard one to judge. I feel like it could go either way. It might get used, it might never be touched. Evolved Sleeper. Becomes a human cleric with base toughness 2/2. If it's a cleric, put a death touch counter on it, becomes a human cleric with 3/3. If it's a Phyrexian, put a 1/1 counter and you draw 1 card and you lose a life. Yeah, it'll be played. It's a perfectly reasonable black mini card that can draw you more cards if it stays alive. The stat line's nothing impressive, but it doesn't have to be, right? It just has to sit there and be mildly useful. The sort of deck that's already going to play something like this is being like, yeah, cool, another one for the pile. Extinguish the light. It's shitty removal. I don't think it'll be played because there's other cheaper removal that does this thing's job better. The fact that it can target planeswalkers is kind of cool, but we already have things like Downfall. Gibbering Barricade, sack a creature, you gain 1 and draw a card. Sacking creatures to draw stuff is usually kind of good. I'm not sure how useful this is in black, though. We'll have to see. Knight of Dusk Shadow. Menace. Opponents can't gain life. Gets +1/+1. Yes, this will be played. Your opponents can't gain life is a useful effect. It's just a good effect. It's on a Menace body. Black aggro is not always fantastic, but I think this would be used. Monstrous Warleech. Blue-black. When it ETBs, if it was kicked, mill 4, its power and toughness are equal to the highest mana value of cards in your graveyard. Okay. This is a weird one, because this is a card that's made actively worse in this specific format by its kicker colors. Black-blue self-mill isn't as much of a thing as you might think it would be, just because there's not as much, like, there's Shelodrad, but I can't think of any other fantastic cards that resurrect, right? But because we can't play this in green-black, where this is another, like, it's a 4-drop XX, where it's pretty decent, all of a sudden this card's a lot less useful. Phyrexian Rager. When it ETBs, draw a card, lose 1 life, 3-drop for a 2/2. The effect is good. The stat line is not. The mana cost's a little high. I'll give this a solid maybe. Vivisector. When a creature control dies, draw a scry 1. 2 and 2. Yeah, it'll probably see play. Warhorse. Was kicked, create a white soldier, sack another creature, gets 2/1. Okay, that's actually kind of cool. But the card itself is pretty shit. The lore implications of the card, of this being like a converted warhorse that was a sleeper agent, spawns in with its rider, and then it kills its rider to power up, is kind of neat. But Pilfer. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose an all-in card, they discard it. More of these spells is almost always good. I didn't know Tiny Bones was a Dominaria card. It's kind of neat. I think this is fine. Sengir Connoisseur, one of my favorite flavor texts in this set. Whenever one or more other creatures die, put a 1/1 on the Connoisseur. Ability triggers only once each turn. That's terrible. No, this isn't going to be played. Flavor text, though. We cannot afford to let the Phyrexians win. They taste terrible. I love that flavor text. Delicious, delicious flavor text. Shadow Prophecy. The top X for X's number of basic land. Put 2 of them in your hand. The rest into your graveyard. You lose 2 life. In multicolor decks, 3 mana, draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. It's not terrible. Hard to judge. Shadow Rite Priest. Other clerics you control get +1. Sacrifice another cleric. Search your library for black creature card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. Huh. Yes, I think this gets played. So, if you're wondering why I'm sitting here just sort of being like, my mouth open, doing the YouTuber face, Shelodrod's Disciple got added in the last historic anthology, and I'm trying to figure out if this slots into into that deck. I think this gets played. I don't know what deck yet. It seems like a good effect, especially, again, It's not limited by sorcery speed. Sheoldred's Restoration. Trigger a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. The spell was kicked, you gain life. Otherwise, you lose life. This card's neat, but 7 mana to resurrect one card that then self-exiles itself. No. Like, it'll be played. It'll be played in Reanimator. But the fact that it exiles itself after it gets cast makes it so much worse. The fact that its kicker is really shitty makes it mediocre. But it'll be played. Splatter Goblin. Okay, that's kind of funny. That's also horrifying, but kind of funny. There are no Goblin Black decks, and Black has better cards than this to run if it's trying to do aggro. No. Stronghold Arena. Can only be played in black, green, white. Gain 3 life for each time it's kicked. Whenever deal combat, you move to the top. If you do, lose life equal to its mana value. This card would be fantastic if it wasn't a 3-color card. Let me go see who are the black, green, white commanders that currently exist. Because this is like an auto slot in for some of that. Black, green, white, all colors, commander. There are not many of them, and they're mostly 5-color cards. Are there seriously no black, green, white? Are there no black? There's one. There's two. There's Nethroi, Apex of Death, and Kethis, the Hidden Hand. Nah, I don't think it gets played. Tattered Apparition. No. Toxic Abomination. Probably not. Tribute to Urbog. Black, blue. Maybe. It's actually kind of useful as removal that gets around Indestructible. Urbog Repossession. Green, black. Maybe. It's not terrible, but most green-black mill doesn't want to be putting non-creature cards into the deck anyway. Pure black. 1 less for each creature card in your graveyard. Yes, this gets played in any deck, in any graveyard player deck, basically. It would be nice if it had more than Death Touch, or had Trample to Death Touch, but... Balduvian Berserker. Okay, so we're finally onto red. So we have done... I think we've done most of them. We're on red. I think this is the last color. Enlist. When it dies, damage to any target. Not in Historic Brawl. Chaotic Transformation. There might be something weird you can do with this, but I'm not sure what it is. I don't think this is good enough to be, like, fantastic, and I think its high cost means that even the decks that would run it are like, yeah, especially as a 6-drop. Coalition Warbrute, Enlist and Trample. Quite possibly, because I think this is the first thing we've seen with Enlist that tramples, and that's a really powerful combo. Defiler of Instinct. It is the red drop Defiler. Whenever you cast a red permanent spell, it deals 1 damage to any target. Yeah, this will be played. It also has First Strike. This seems really good, even though it's basically just keyword soup. Except I guess it's Effect Soup edition. Dragon Whelp. 1/0. 4 more times. Sack it. No. No. There's no self-respecting dragon deck that's going to be running this over something useful in a 4-drop slot. Elder Dragon War. 2 damage, discarding number of cards, create a 4/4 dragon. Probably mostly because of the second effect, I think.
And because none of these, no single one of these effects is incredible, but all of these effects combined are decent, and so it probably gets played. Maybe in prowess decks. I haven't seen red-blue prowess aggro as a thing yet, but if there was a card that was going to help make it a thing, this is what it would look like. Fires a victory, red-blue. If it was kicked, draw a card, deals equal damage equal to target creature opponents or either number of cards in your hand. Actually, maybe or probably. It's not terrible for what it does. Especially at only 2 mana to be like a 6 burn. I don't know though. It's a lot. You maybe get a lot of damage if you play it early, and then it still can draw you a card if you do it late. So possibly. Flowstone Infusion +2 -2. No idea. Flowstone Kavu. Menace gets +1/-1, so it can turn into, at max, a 4/1. Probably not. Furious Bellow. +3/0, first strike until end of turn. Scry 1. Maybe Feather the Redeemed. I don't know what would slot in. The first strike is decent. Get 2 Amplifier. Blue-red. If it was kicked, return target creature and opponent controls to its owner's hand. Every cast an instant sorcery spell gets +2/+0. Again, more of this red-blue aggro support card. Goblin Picker. Discard a card. Draw a card. I don't think so. I think there's better goblins in the 2 slot, but I could be wrong. I think its tribal affiliation is the biggest thing about it. Hammerhand. When it ETBs, target creature can't block. It gets +1/+1 in haste. Yeah, probably actually. This seems like a pretty decent card for how much mana it costs. I don't know what deck runs it yet, but it seems good. Hurler Cyclops. No. It's a terrible card with a terrible effect and a miserable... Like, the stat line is there, but the effect is just so bad. Hurloon Battle Hymn. 4 damage target creature if it was kicked. Probably not. Thrall of the Pit. Black-red. Again, probably not, but it could be. There's usually when you take control of something with red, and you're playing red-black, you sack it for another effect. You don't be like, I'm just going to spend 3 extra mana to get it sacked. But I guess it's kind of... No, I feel like this is just too expensive. Probably not. JS Fire NATO, no. Keldon Flame Sage, look at the top X. You may exile instant sorcery. You may cast an exiled card without paying its mana cost. What the hell is this card? This is horrifying. Okay, it's not as bad as I thought. Oh, it's still... You can do some shit with this. I think it'll be played. I don't know if it'll be good when it's played. Keldon Strike Team, red, white, create tokers, creature control of haste. Interesting. Probably not, but probably not, just because I don't think red-white necessarily wants something like this. Lightning Strike. Pretty sure it's a reprint. Maria's Outrider. No. Molten Monstrosity. X less to cast. X to raise power creature control. Trample. Maybe in red-green. Phoenix Chick. Maybe in hard red aggro. Reyes Firebrand. Defending player can't block. Not a terrible card in red aggro. The domain effect is pretty bad, but the card on its own is actually decent. A 3/1 for that can't that makes stuff that able to block that turn is decent. Rodeveld Hordemaster. Yes, it's a good Goblin 2-drop, and it has a really good effect. Yes, this will be played in Goblin decks. Shivan Devastator. Yes. I'm sorry, just look at this thing. X1/1 counters Flying and Haste. 1 red. Red decks will love it. Green-red decks love it. Like, absolutely is going to be played. Smash to Dust. I don't know. I don't think so. Because, like, it's a lot of utility, but I'm not sure it's the right utility. Especially because it's sorcery speed. Sprouting Goblin. Green-red. When it's kicked, search for a land, reveal, put into your hand. Sack a land, draw a card. I don't think there's green-red land sack decks that exist currently, so my guess is probably not. Temporal Firestorm. Red, white, blue. Because of its stupidly high cost and its colors, I'm going to say probably not. I don't think there's many cards that want to play this deck. Thrill Possibility, it's a reprint. Twinferno. Quite possibly, actually. It's not a bad card. And I think it'd probably be useful. Double Strike is a good thing. I think that this might be played. I think that it probably won't be played for both of its effects. I think it'll be played for one of its effects in different decks. Vishno Branch Rider, red, green, +1/+. No. No. It's crappy, and I don't think anybody wants to play it. Warhost's Frenzy, red, black. Quite possibly, yes, actually. Whenever a creature you control dies this turn, draw a card. That's a hell of an effect. So I'm going to say yes, this will be played. Yamiava Steel Crusher, 2/2, enlist, sacks to destroy an artifact. Probably because it's a creature that sacks to kill artifacts. That's useful. Yoshia declares war. Create a 0/2 Thopter with flying named Ornithopter. Tapping number of artifacts. Deal damage to creature. Planeswalker. One target. Blah, 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 blah. This is a weird card. My default response is no, because I don't think there's a red artifact deck that currently exists. If that deck comes to exist, maybe. Barkweave Crusher. Oh, we're finally to green. Phyrexia may be ancient. 2/5. Probably not. Doesn't have trample. Bite Down. It's a fight card. It'll be played if this is the card that you happen to own and you don't have the other fight cards. No, actually, wait. This is better. This is better than a fight card. Yeah, this might probably be played. Bog Badger, green-black. Probably not. Broken Wings, reprint. Colossal Growth. Red-green. Probably not. Deathbloom Gardener. Yes, it's Death Touch and mana and a mana dork. It'll probably be played. Defiler of Vigor. Oh, look. It's another Defiler. Yes, this will probably end up being the best one, in my very humble opinion, because green likes playing permanents the most. And it also ramps the fastest. And it's also, whenever you cast a green permanent spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Elfheim Worm. No. Elvish Hydromancer. Green-blue. It's a 7-drop to make a token copy. Probably not, but I could be wrong. It's got a lot of good stuff. It's just too expensive, it feels like. Vinewall. I think this actually probably would get played in the currently existing Defender decks. Gaia's Might. Probably not. Herd Migration. No, absolutely not. This is terrible. Hexbane Tortoise. Actually, maybe because of its effect to search for a basic land, it'd be played, but it probably not to actually be cast. Hexbane Tortoise. Ward 2, 3/2. Not really. I don't think so. Leaf Crowned Visionary. Yes, because elves absolutely needed more tribal support. Whenever you cast an elf spell, you may pay 1, you can draw a card. Yeah, this is 100% going to be played. It's fantastic. Line Breaker Baloth. Can't be blocked with 2 or less. Probably not. Maybe in some green ramp decks, but I feel like there's better stuff to ramp with. Land of War Green Widow. Reach Trample Domain. No, this is terrible. Actually, the stat line for a 4/3 is not awful. Land of War Loom Speaker, my bad. Out of mana of any color, target land you control becomes a 3/3 elemental with haste till end of turn. It's still a land. Activate only as a sorcery. Yes, it's a fairly decently statted elf mana dork. Land of War Stalker. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it becomes +1/+0. Maybe an elf dex. Managoth. No. Well, it's actually kind of decently statted, but still probably no. Mossbeard Ancient. No, there's better stuff to play for 7. Nishaba Brawler. Domain. I don't see it. Quarion Beast Caller. Whenever you cast a creature spell, put a 1/1 on it. When it dies, distribute the 1/1 counters, where X is the number of 1/1 counters on. Possibly. I think this is actually kind of decent. Scout the Wilderness. Green-white. Probably not, because I don't think green-white is usually a land aggro ramp. Silverback Elder. Yes. Because whenever you cast a creature spell, gain 4 life, look at the top 5 and ramp a land, or destroy target artifact or enchantment. I think this is pretty decent, especially with that stat line. I think it'll be played. Slimefoot's Survey. Domain. I don't think so. I think it's too heavily costed for an effect that you wouldn't really necessarily want, but hey, maybe it's got a purpose in 5-color decks. Snare Spinner. Probably not. This feels like a tech card, honestly. Strength of the Coalition. Green-white. 2/2. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Maybe. Sunbathing Root Walla. No. Tail Swipe. Probably. Tear Asunder. Black-green. Exile target treatment was kicked. Exile target non-land permanent instead. Holy shit. Yeah, actually, this will definitely be played. Exile target non-land permanent is a hell of an ability for 4 mana. Territorial Mout. No. Threats undetected. Search your library for up to 4 creature cards with different powers and reveal them. Opponent chooses 2. Shuffle the rest. Put the 1 in your hand. Quite possibly, actually. Okay. I wanted to rant about this one as well. This card's terrible in Historic Brawl because you can only play it in green, black, blue. And yes, it's kind of a Tarmogoyf, like a shitty-ass budget Tarmogoyf. But in Historic Brawl, power and toughness on a creature aren't as important as it actually being, like, useful. And so since it's a number of creatures in your graveyard, milling yourself down is kind of difficult, and it doesn't have trample. This is not a fantastic card. It's a pretty mediocre card. I'm sure that in Standard, this is going to make a lot of people very upset. But this ain't Standard. Probably won't be very good, and probably won't be played. Vine Shaper Prodigy, green-blue, if it was kicked. Look at the top 3. Probably not. Weather Siege. Search your library for a basic land card. One second. How many more of these cards do I have? Just 36 more. And then I can lose my voice completely. Search library for basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tap, shuffle, create a 1/1 sapperling. Target creature gets domain, and then this is pretty bad. World spell. Look at the top 7, reveal a non-saga, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom. Put up to 2 non-saga permanents onto your... Yes, but probably not in mono green, I think. I could be wrong. Yavimaya Iconoclast. When it ETBs, gets +1 in haste in red-green. Probably not. I guess a 3/2 with trample in red-green is not terrible, but I feel like there's just other cards they like more. Yamiya Sojourner. Along the long tree, folks for actually invading again after old centuries as if they'd never left. Domain. No. No, stat line's too bad. Domain is too hard. Automatic Librarian. We are in artifacts. Ooh. I'm losing my voice. What time is it? Oh boy. When it ETBs, scry 2. Nothing special here. Golden Argosy. When it attacks, exile creatures that crew it, return them to the battlefield, tap the end of their owner's step. Crew 1. Yes, this is going to be played. This is a very cool ETB effect that you can use to abuse it, and it goes to any colors. I would be very surprised if we don't see any use of this. At a bare minimum, I feel like Yorion decks would like this card. Hero's Heirloom. Maybe in existing artifact decks, I think it's kind of decent. Inscribed Tablet. Let's read what this does. 1, sack 5, real top 5, put a land. If you didn't put a card in your hand, this way draw a card. So maybe you use this as part of an engine to do other wonky stuff. On its own, this seems pretty mediocre. Joda's Codex. Domain to draw a card. Because what Golos decks really needed was a card that says, tap this to draw a card. Karn's Silex. Okay, yes. There's very few cards that I am very confident most of the time about being able to say what will happen with a card. This card is probably going to get used in Historic Brawl. It's going to then get overused in every single deck, and then it's going to get banned from Historic Brawl. Why? Because the last time we had a card that did something like this, that was monocolor removal in everything, it was Ugin, and it got banned. So this is probably going to end up banned, is going to be my personal guess for this card in Historic Brawl. Meteorite, it's a reprint. Relic of Legends, add 1 mana of any color, tap and untapped, add 1... That actually can probably do quite a lot in the right deck. I think that'll get used. Salvage Mana Worker, add 1 mana of any color, activate only once per turn. I don't know what deck uses it yet, to be honest, but maybe. Shield Wall Sentinel, search a card with... Maybe it gets used in Defender decks. It's definitely an interesting, weird piece of search. I don't know that there's a deck that currently exists in the meta that uses the card as printed. Timeless Lotus. Why is this mythic? Is it because it has Lotus in the name? Probably. Not an exciting card. Vanquisher's Axe, +2/+0. Probably not. Walking Bulwark. Defender. Target creature with Defender gains haste and attack and assigns combat damage to its toughness. Activate only as a sorcery. Actually, yeah. This probably gets played. This seems decent. Weatherlight completed. Okay, so here's where we get into the bummer part of it. This can't be used as a commander, which disappoints me because it's not a creature. As a vehicle, it's kind of bad. But what if it... So basically, it becomes a creature once it has 4 Phyresis counters on it. Whenever a creature you control dies, you put a counter on it. If it has 7 or more counters on it, you draw a card. Otherwise, you just scry 1. I can see this being used for just being kind of useful as a 2-drop, right? It does have to sit around a while to do anything, but it's not the worst thing. It can go into any color. It might be a bit of a bait now that I'm actually looking at it, because getting 7 creatures to die is quite a lot. Okay, we are into the lands. I don't know the name for this land cycle, but there are 2 land cycles in it. I believe one of these is a reprint. Let me just go check. But it's it's the first time that's been in. Let's pull this up. Addarkar Wastes. $14. Ugh. Yeah, so it's a reprint, but it's the first time in Historic Brawl. I don't know what the name of this land cycle is. I'm assuming it's something like Pain Lands or something. Addarkar Wastes. Oh, man. I think it's Pain Lands, but I could be wrong. Anyway, this is one cycle. I think they will be interesting to see how this plays out. They are powerful in that they enter untapped, but you have to spend life each time you want to do anything with them. I queued off my thing. Next up. Okay, Cave of Kolios. It's another Pain Land. Contaminated Aquifer. Okay. These are interesting to me. And if it's not obvious to you why, this is the other land cycle. I am more curious about these and how they will impact Historic Brawl than I am about the Pain Lands. Because the Pain Lands are probably just good, right? These are special because they're the dull, boring Plain Lands, but they have basic land types, which means you can search for them with a fair number of stuff. This will probably be most meaningful in decks that either are green or splash green, but I think it's still going to be kind of cool. I don't know what these are going to do to the format. I don't know if they'll be kind of a whiff. I don't know if they'll be a big hit because of what they can do, but we'll see pretty much. Okay, so we've covered the 2. For the next of these, so for Pain Lands or for, what am I going to call these? Shitty duels, I guess. Crappy dual lands. I'm just going to skip past them. For other stuff we'll go through. Crystal Grotto, scry 1, add 1 mana of any color. Probably not going to see much play. Geothermal Bog. Cruddy Duel. Cruddy Duel. Cruddy Duel. Painland. Cruddy Duel. This is the other card that people have been a little bit excited about. Sorry, I keep moving away from my mic. Add 1 mana of any color. Spend this only to cast a legendary spell. Add 1 mana of any color among legendary permanents you control. Exile it. Target legendary creature gains hexproof and indestructible until the end of the turn. A lot of people are saying this is going to be the new Fixer. I am not sure I agree with that. I think it'll go well into existing 5-color legendary decks. So first Sliver, and of course, go motherfucking Shintai, or as my friend likes to call it, Gauche Hentai. Yeah, this is good. For other decks, I don't think this is necessarily as good as something like Command Tower. I think it's probably fine, but I don't think it's like, oh no, what am I going to do? I must craft this card right now. I could be wrong. But there's a big difference between add 1 mana color in your commander's color and adding mana that can only be spent on legendaries. Still probably good, just not the godly thing most people think. Crappy Duel, Crappy Duel, Painland, Painland, Crappy Duel, Crappy Duel. Thran Portal enters tapped unless you control 2 or fewer. Choose a basic land. It's the chosen type. In addition to its other types, mana abilities. Costs an additional 1 life to activate. This seems really good, actually. Also means that if you really want to do domain by doing something really weird, you can use this as part of that. I don't think you... so maybe this is the support for domain lands, but... Oh, you know what else is really weird about this that I just noticed? This is gate subtyping. So you can fetch this with anything that would fetch a gate. Maybe this isn't as bad as I thought. This might end up being the sleeper land in this set, I think. More so than... Like, people are looking at Plaza and saying, oh, it's Fixer. Well, this is anything. Sure, it only does it on Enter the Battlefield, and then it turns into like a monocolor Pain, but still. All right. That is every single... No, it's not.
And we've got a crappy duel and a pain land. And with that, we've gone through every single new card in Dominaria. If you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. If you like my stuff, please hit the subscribe button. If you think that other cards are going to end up being really useful, let me know. We can fight about it. How do I feel about Dominaria overall now that I've seen all of this? The cards I'm most curious about are probably the Defilers. I know that they're not subtle, and there's probably some more subtle stuff that will be actually. So that's not true. Biggest ones: Karn's Silex. This will be very interesting to watch what happens with it. This because I can see this becoming an auto include in every deck. Karn's Silex. Where's a Defiler? Let me go find a Defiler. Here we go. The Defiler cycle could also be pretty impactful. Remains to be seen what colors they're impactful in. I'm expecting green to be the biggest one, but I could be wrong. So Silex, Defiler, and then there's not much that isn't legendary that I'm like, oh man, this is going to be so big. A lot of the legendaries are definitely interesting. Some of them are just kind of terrible. Some of them are going to be the new Go Shintai. There's a mix here. It's a mix. How do I feel about this set overall? I'm disappointed. So I like Silex. I think that'll be impactful. I think the lands will probably be impactful. I don't know which ones will be the most impactful yet. I'm disappointed in Shieldrod because it's not as good as I think it. Like, it's not as cool as I'd like it to be. And that's pretty much it. In terms of the impact for Historic Brawl, I think outside of the new Commanders or new Legendary cards, outside of Defilers, Silex, and the new Legendaries, I think it's going to be a pretty muted impact. I didn't see too many things that, like, the card pool in Arena is getting saturated to the point that unless you print something powerful or new, it's not going to do too much. That's pretty much all I've got. So for anybody who somehow watched this whole thing, wow, thanks. If you've got feedback, thoughts, please let them in the comments. I'm always working to improve. If you like my stuff, please subscribe. I do a lot of Historic Brawl decks. But that's all I've got for today. So until next time, take care. And I will talk to you then.